So, you're intrigued with TEXL and would like to use it, but you're not quite sure how to actually talk about it later in the classroom or in a workshop setting. Maybe I can give you some pointers, the way that I do it. So, first of all, when I employ it, I either send out the link, if I already know the people, I send out the link to the different people, either as a personalized survey or the general link, or if I do it in a bigger classroom, I actually have a QR code or a URL shortener for the actual URL and tell the students to fill it in. Before I do this though, I give them the usual disclaimer. It's all anonymous, nobody will know that it was you. I cannot see your results later, so I can never say Joe or Jane or whatever, these were your results. So these are just results for you, and you should ensure that you get out of it what you want. So if you're lying to somebody, you're lying to yourself. You're not lying to me because I won't see it. And I also tell them there is no right and wrong. It's how you feel at the moment right now. When you see the question, what is the right answer for you at the moment? And then I let them fill it in. And usually that takes a while. As usual, there are some people that are faster than others. And sure, I crack some jokes if some of the people are not ready yet, and I have to wait around a little bit. And then at some point I see that almost everybody is ready with the results. So I then do not go into the big reveal right away, but first off, I have another set of disclaimers, and that is, I tell them, whatever we're going to look at right now is not etched in stone. This is, as I said in the beginning, this is how you feel right now at this moment. It might be that the weather is not particularly nice outside, and that has an effect on your mood and how you answer surveys. It might be that your hamster died in the morning, and that has an effect on how you answer surveys. It might be that somebody said something wrong in the morning or something really nice, and that affects you on that day. So take everything you see with not a grain of salt, but at least with the understanding that that is just a snapshot in time. But I also tell them it is just a snapshot, but it can serve as inspiration for you. So rather than going on Facebook and filling out all those mini quizzes there and then getting your personality, or trying to fill in the questionnaire in some women's magazine, this is actually based on scientific research, scientifically validated scales. So go test it out a little bit, what that means if that score were actually an approximation for you. And then I tell them, all right, let's look at the scores. And I tell them, you have your individual score in your dashboard. I cannot see this, but you can go in there. But to make sense of your individual score, let's all together now look into the aggregate score of the group that I have in front of me. So as a survey creator, I go then into my survey, I go into the results section for the respective construct, and you will see two panels. On the right side, you see the average, which is the mean of the group that you're surveying right there. And then you see on the left side, you see a distribution for that group. First off, I usually go on the right side and tell them, all right, let's look at the mean. And whatever the mean is, we talk a little bit about it, given the construct, what was the scaling behind the construct, is the class or the workshop audience, is that more on the higher end or on the lower end? And we discuss a little bit, or I tell them, well, this actually means for you, if you're on the higher end, if, you know, let's say a 5.3, that means, you know, most of you have not crossed those answer options on the items. And then I go to the right side and say, well, on the right, and I tell them on the right side, there is only the mean. It doesn't tell you where you individually are. In fact, there is a lot of variation around the mean. There's a standard deviation, and within plus and minus standard deviation, you have about 68, 69% of the people. And I tell them, well, there is a distribution. And that distribution is also relevant for you, because if you look at your individual score, you might want to say, well, where am I in that distribution, not just with regard to the mean. So that's when I turn to the left panel and I tell them, look, if the workshop audience here is 100%, this is how the percentages distribute. in this distribution. Now, when you look at your individual score, ask yourself, where am I? Am I somewhere in the middle, where most of the people sit? Or am I more at the fringes? If you're at the middle, you can interpret whether you're really smack in the middle or a little bit left or right, but the chances are you're actually much like most other people. If you're a little bit more at the fringes, it might be a little bit more interesting for you to find out about it. And then I tell them about what it means to be at the fringes. And importantly, I usually make it in such a way that I don't say this is good and this is bad. Obviously, that depends on the construct, but let's take a construct like Machiavellianism. So for people high in Machiavellianism, I would tell them, well, good for you. You apparently have a sense of power in organizations and what it takes to see projects through. You think in terms of coalitions and alliances and antagonists, and for you this is like a map you're reading, and it's great because you're probably great project managers. But at the same time, I also tell them, but it's also hard to be you, because if you are at that top, that fringe, that means you might be a little bit cynical already about organizations. You think everything is about power and status, and everything is a struggle that you have to anticipate and somehow navigate in. So you're great for certain things, but you're probably also struggling with a lot of other things. And then I go to the low end and say, well, if you're low in Machiavellianism, that doesn't mean you don't understand that power is a relevant concept. It's just not a relevant concept for you. You don't want to see the world in that way. And as such, it's actually great to be you because you understand there are so many other ways how humans coordinate and would like to work with each other beyond the issue of power and status. At the same time, I also tell them, it might be hard to be you because you're then taken aback and surprised when suddenly you do encounter power plays at work. So for you, it would actually make sense to think a little bit about it. How does power work at work, and what do I need to do potentially in order to see certain projects through? So you see, with the way that I'm talking to the participants, I tell them usually not something is bad or good, but in each dimension I try to highlight the positives or the benefits and the challenges for the respective person. And then I come to the second part, which is, this is how to understand yourself, and then what can you do with that? And that's a great point where you reference to, for instance, sections in your lecturing or in your workshop. You could say, well, tomorrow we're going to talk about this. In our second session tomorrow, we're actually going to talk about what to do if you're low in Machiavellianism, because that's what we're going to talk about. Boom, 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 boom. So you can really point them towards material you're going to cover with them. Or if you're not covering it yourself, you can point to other material outside. You could say, well, there's actually a great book on this, or in this textbook we're using on the pages 395 to 96, you can actually read up about it and find out how you can become better in politics at work and potentially also power play. Or you weave in some pop elements and you say, well, if you're at the low end of Machiavellianism, maybe you should watch the series Succession, because that gives you a little bit of a story around how highly power motivated, to the degree that they're actually Machiavellian people, act at work. And that is good for inspiration. And to the high Machiavellianist, I would say in the room, well, you probably already all watched Succession and you thought this was a blast because it corresponds with your reality. You might want to watch something else, and then I would point something that's a little bit more developmental to them and not feeding into the same characteristics. And with that, I then tell them, all right, we now have your scores. But as I said in the beginning, these are just your scores, how you perceive yourself. And it always makes sense to triangulate yourself against something else. One way how to triangulate yourself, as we've done in this course, is against the distribution within the course, saying, well, this is how I score vis-a-vis other people in the course. And it makes more sense to you than how you score. Another thing you can do as a survey creator, you can actually activate the further platform benchmarks. So you can activate other comparison groups from within the platform, for instance, only the women or only the men or only people above 30, and these would then be displayed on these two panels as well, with a panel, or not with a panel, with a bar, but with a bar on the right side and various bars on the left side as well. And it's quite nice because then you can see yourself, for instance, let's say the Germans vis-a-vis the French and the Spanish or the Americans, and you can compare them with each other. As the platform grows, we're going to get more data, and you're just going to have a lot more comparison opportunities. And again, that's nice for the students because they can triangulate themselves. How do I stand in comparison to other people? And lastly, which is also an option within TEXL, you can say, well, this is just a snapshot in time. I actually want you to do this survey yourself, or maybe within your workshop or within your lecture, multiple times. We're going to do things with each other. I'm going to teach you things. And then I want to survey you again at the end of our working with each other, our workshop, our lecture, and then see whether you've improved. And maybe even encourage them and say, well, I also want to see how you're doing across time. So let's see if you come back to this platform in a year or 2 years' time, how you score then. Because whatever we are as humans, we are all on a journey. And TEXL is just taking snapshots on that journey. And sometimes it's interesting to see which type of journeys we're taking. But for that, you want that type of data over time. And then another beautiful feature of TEXL is that you can get multi-source data. I would highly encourage any survey creator to actually also encourage their participants to collect that multi-source data. So meaning reaching out to other people, superiors, so people above you in the hierarchy, maybe other employees, suppliers, customers, and so on, and send them the link as well. And I think the motivation for your participants should be there, because what I tell them is like, you're just gathering right now how you perceive yourself. And sure, there's a lot of merit in that because you're usually a very good judge of yourself. But we all know that we're sometimes not the best judge of ourselves, and that different people see different parts of us. Superiors might see something else than their colleagues or people that actually have to work for me. Do you want to find out how they see you? Well, then use that feature. And if they have that other data, you as a survey creator will not be able to see it in your dashboard, but they themselves will see it in their individual dashboards. So then they can triangulate their personal score, their individual score, with how, for instance, the group of superiors or colleagues or clients and so on perceive them. Again, in an anonymous way, so nobody is able to tell who the others were, but they can sort of make sense. Am I perceiving myself as better or worse than, or let's say different than the other people that have rated me? And with that, I think you have a good first guideline what you can do with these surveys in your classroom. If you do have other questions, please let us know, and we will try to respond within the TEXL team. All right, have fun trying it out.